The radical theory appeared as the result of complex historical, political, and economical events that took place in the 1960s. After the Second World War, American government concentrated on the Cold War that broke out between the US and the USSR. President Truman went along with an anti-communism policy that was popular with US voters. Better dead than red, it was a promoted slogan. In the 1960s and 70s, Western civilization went through a serious crisis aggravated by the unsuccessful US war in Vietnam. At the same time, the ideological influence of socialists increased in the USA and globally. Between 1957 and 1974, the FBI listed nearly 500,000 Americans as potential national security risks. They included to this list the Medical Committee for Human Rights, National Lawyers Guild, American Indian Movement members, and Black Panthers from Oakland, California. Thousands of activists revolted against militarism, unequal development, and social injustice. The social tension was so high that peaceful student protests could result in bloody killings. This is exactly what happened in Ohio when 4 young students were shot by troopers. Radicals in the West rejected consumerism and militarism and romanticized the ideals of revolutionaries in China and Cuba and liberation movements in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The prominent American lawyers emerged primarily at the UC Berkeley School of Criminology. They focused on unveiling the political crimes of the corrupted US government and attracted thousands of supporters. The progressive criminology movement responded by developing a new understanding of origins of crimes. This approach was based on the brilliant works of famous German philosopher, economist, historian, sociologist, political theorist, journalist, and socialist revolutionary Karl Marx. Marxists argue that the economic system of capitalism itself causes crime. The capitalistic system is based on the exploitation of the working class by the ruling class, leading to the ever-increasing wealth of one class and ever-increasing poverty of the other. Radical criminologists examine the processes through which deviance, criminal behavior, and state responses to crime. In the 70s, the US government transformed US law enforcement into the largest, the most expensive, and most punitive system of justice in the world. The radical criminology is so radical that within this movement there are no commonly accepted approaches and definitions, but we can distinguish several principles. The main idea is society in general is divided into classes, whose members have similar values and interests, the principal classes being those who own the means of production, the ruling class, and those who are employed in production, the working class. The principal conflict in society is between the ruling class and the working class. How it works on the example of the USA. Almost half of the elected representatives to the first US Congress served alongside a blood relative. More than 700 families who have had 2 or more members in Congress, 167 families with members elected to public office for at least 3 consecutive generations. 22 families have had at least 4 consecutive generations elected to public office, while 4 families have had at least 5 generations. More than half of those in Congress are millionaires. Only 1 senator has no educational degree beyond a high school diploma. Members of Congress make in 2 months what the average American makes in 1 year. It means that the narrow circle of well-educated and rich families are ruling poor and undereducated citizens. The laws that the government creates and enforces are aiming to support this status quo. Well-known tool for this is lobbying. Lobbying in the United States describes paid activity in which special interest groups hire well-connected professional advocates and lawyers to argue for specific legislation in decision-making bodies such as the United States Congress. Radical theory principle described this. No consensus exists in society on the basic values and interests of individuals, and on the contrary, Society is characterized by conflict on these issues. The enactment of law is the result of a conflict and compromise process in which different groups attempt to promote their own values and interests. The lower class is victimized through unemployment, pollution, and exploitation. Because the law is a tool of the ruling class on its conflict with the working class, the socially harmful actions of the ruling class are generally not defined as crimes by the official criminal justice system. The higher a group's political and economic position, the more the law in general tends to represent the values and interests of that group. Law enforcement agencies will process individuals from lower rather than higher political and economic groups. The crime problem can be solved only by the overthrow of the capitalist economic system and the establishment of a socialist state. Once capitalism is overthrown, the law in its present form will eventually become unnecessary, as the conflict between classes will have been resolved. Historical illustration. If you were shocked to see armed people in the capital this year, you have to learn history better, because the idea is barely fresh. 54 years ago, on May 2, 1967, 30 gun-toting Black Panthers marched up the front steps and into the Capitol in Sacramento, California. They were carrying rifles, pistols, and shotguns to demonstrate their opposition to an anti-gun bill by Oakland Republican Don Mulford. The bill was crafted with the goal of disarming members of the Black Panthers Party who were conducting armed patrols of Oakland neighborhoods. It caused the National Rifle Association and Ronald Reagan to back a gun control bill, Marshall Act. Perfect application of radical criminological theory. The popularity of radical theory is limited by the complexity of its fundamentals. It is based on the scientific definitions of political economy: economic base, mode of production, property relationship, non-economic institutions, capitalism. To understand all this, an average citizen has to spend a significant amount of time learning political economy, history, and political geography. No surprise that the criminologist theories that say something simple like crimes are happening because life is hard are more popular than radical theory. Nowadays, the radical movement has transformed under new historical obstacles. Last year, we witnessed a lot of events when people were using the word communism just to show they don't like it, just like in the 60s. To be radical is to grasp the root of the matter, but for man, the root is man himself, says Karl Marx. It's noteworthy that Marx's words are sold now online as the quote of famous Oakland activist Angela Davis. This is how capitalism makes profit on activism and communism both. Learning the history of criminology helps us to grasp the root of systematic political crimes that affect all of us. Stay aware, stay fair, stay educated.